What is up, everybody? My name is Whooped. We're going to be doing a tier list today, but first I want to share some news real quick. On Friday, I had a second interview for a teaching position at a prison. It was basically a 1v1 rank match. Me and the other candidate had to teach the same curriculum to the same class of inmates back to back, and then had a panel interview after, except instead of MMR, we were competing for a career. On Monday, I received a call and I was offered the job. It's meaningful work and I'm really excited for it. As some of you know, it's been a tough couple of months for me. I lost my apartment and creating content has suffered because of it. I didn't have the stability I needed, but now I do, financially and otherwise, so I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be streaming on Twitch about 30 hours a week. I'm going to stream a few hours before each shift, and I'm going to stream a lot more on the weekends. This is going to allow me to cherry pick cool games to put on YouTube, but I'm also going to put originals on YouTube like this video. Anyway, we have a tier list to do, so let's get into it. Every unit in Mechabellum is viable. You can win with any unit. A low grade does not mean a unit is useless or unwinnable. Everybody's going to have a different perspective because we all see the game differently, approach the game differently, and feel the game differently. Our standard is not can win with it. That's not what we're judging it by. Our standard is comparative efficiency to their peers or counterparts. There will almost always be an exception. Mechabellum is very situational, but our standard is not that exception. And lastly, this is just for fun, and this is just my opinion, before you roast me in the comments. S tier basically means they're mandatory. A tier means they're a little bit overtuned, and this is largely because a big portion of the game revolves around chaff and chaff clear, so anything having to do with those two roles is just going to add a tremendous amount of value to the unit. B tier means they're solid, and they do not have a lot of drawbacks. C tier means they're balanced. It might look bad because they're in C tier, but to me, it just means they're a good unit, or even a great unit in many situations, but they have quite a few limitations in others, which is exactly how it should be. D tier means they're a good or even great unit, but in niche situations. They aren't very applicable to most boards unless it's in a non-core capacity. And F tier means their counterparts are better alternatives to fulfill their specific role. Usually they have the most impact in an off-role capacity or as a bridge unit with little to no investment. The Abyss is a good unit, but I think it needs a lot of setup. It's a Titan, so it's going to scale efficiently, but it's nowhere near where it was. And overall, I think it's just okay. This is going to make a lot of people mad, but I think the Arclight is the worst unit in the game, or at least it was. It got buffed recently and the jury is still out on how good it is, but I think they suck still because its main purpose is to chaff clear and it doesn't do that particularly well. It needs secondary chaff to support it or else it could be overran pretty easily with adequate chaff boards. It's not good with aggro, it doesn't scale well outside HP. Hounds have fire, Mustangs have HE, Spiders have HE, Wraith have 8 gun and HE. Arclights are just Arclights, they don't get any extra chaff clearing capabilities. I want to like them, but their strength are just not aligned with their role. And before you say I've won games with Arclights or, I saw X win games with Arclights, remember, that's not our methodology. That is not the threshold we're judging them by. I think they're best used in the early game when you use them as a bridge unit with little to no investment, or if you get a higher level job that you could take advantage of a particular situation with. I'm sorry, I just can't. They're going F for me. Low investment. The game is very chaff focused. Crawlers are going to get S tier. This is especially true with Subterranean Blitz and Fire being nerfed a little bit. Again, chaff is a core fundamental. Fangs are one of two units that are primary chaff, and the shields and ignite give them added utility. I think Fangs are fantastic, easily S tier. Farseers are an interesting unit. I think they're best in a bridge or complementary role. They're a jack of all trades and they have a lot of utility. They could be a carry, although that is not their strength. If you use them as a complementary unit or a bridge unit and not as a carry, I think their value is pretty high. They don't scale exceptionally well, but given their applicability to pretty much any board, I'm going to put them in the C category. The Fire Badger has had a lot of changes recently. Fire Badgers aren't carries, and as your primary chaff clear, they're okay, but they have a lot of limitations. I think they're at their best when you get a high level job that can wreak havoc on the flank, or you put them on the line, and it could be a pretty solid unit defensively in some cases. Ultimately, I think it's just a really bad Vulcan. It has much less splash, DPS, and range, and without best partner. And before you say, but whoop, it's only a 200 cost unit, I understand that, but you only get 2 deployments per round, and with all the changes it's hard to tell anyway, but I think it has too many limitations for anything higher than a C right now. The Fortress scales well, it has added utility with AA, Barrage, and Barriers, it can play the tanky co-lead, it could be priority DPS, it fits different styles, and it's just a really, really solid unit. The Hacker is a good unit. It's just a little too situational for me. It can absolutely take over games in the right circumstance, but those are hard to manufacture consistently, or they require a level of commitment that can be answered with a knowledge check, like Fang Hacker for example. They also don't synergize well with strong single target DPS units. When they're good, they're great, but they're too niche for me to put in the C tier. Hounds are interesting because they're low cost, they have a lot of utility with fire, armor, and the ability to get rid of things like fire, acid, and smoke, They're also supposed to be okay at chaff clear. That being said, they're one of the units that in theory they're good, but not so much in practice. They're paper hounds. I'm going to put them in the F tier. I would only use them as a bridge or for niche off roll. They're just not good. I actually like the marksman a lot. I think they're best when they're paired with amazing chaff clear. They scale pretty well. They have solid utility. However, they're single target and they fire very slowly. They're very board reliant and they don't fit a lot of compositions. The only reason they're not F is because they scale well. The melting point has a lot of limitations. It's terrible into sledges and steel balls. It's terrible into chaff. However, it's the king of taking down units that otherwise would be invincible, and oftentimes you could do it at level 1. I feel like the melting point is more of a situational counter than it is a carry, but because it is so good at dealing with unstoppable units, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I think Mechabellum's limitation on deployments each round inflates Titan's value in general, including the mountain. Even so, it's still a pretty solid unit. It has utility with broken range, which in my opinion is it's a ridiculous tech. It has no business in the game. It also has armor plating for situational bricks, and it just scales pretty well because it's a Titan. I don't know if it should go in B or C, but I'm going to put it in C. Mustangs are the best worst unit. They're the opposite of hounds. Instead of appearing good on paper and bad in practice, I feel like they read like a horror story. They're extremely susceptible to fire. They can't do anything to armor. They especially cannot touch armor plating. They do have a little bit of utility in AM and HE, but their DPS is reduced when they shoot missiles, and their HE is completely obsolete versus a subterranean blitz. It also lowers their DPS. That being said, somehow they're actually good, and I think they just kind of fill in where needed. They can act as a carry, they can act as chaff, anti-missile, secondary chaff clear, support DPS. They just fit pretty much anywhere on the board, and they can fit a lot of different compositions. They have a ton of limitations, but they also add a ton of value in many different areas. I'm going to give them C. When you have a solid chaff board and amazing chaff clear, the Overlord can be outstanding. It can deal an absurd amount of damage. I think the problem though is that you have to have really good chaff clear. It's just a little bit too expensive and a little too reliant on the board state for me to move it into the C tier. Although I think it's right on the edge of it, you could absolutely make a case for it being C tier, but I think it's just a little too expensive and not consistent enough given how poorly it does in a chaff clear. The Phoenix synergizes well with many boards. It could be a carry, it scales well, it could also fit into compositions as a situational counter, a bridge unit, or a mercenary unit. It has utility, it's inexpensive. There's a lot to like about the Phoenix. It won't do great in spell-heavy games. AA Barrage can give it trouble, Marksman can give them trouble, but overall, I think its strengths heavily outweigh its weaknesses. I'm going to give it B tier. I like Raidens a lot. They did just get nerfed HP-wise, so we'll see how that plays out. I think their tech choices are good. It could be a mercenary or a carry. It does need to be paired with good chaff clear, but overall it's a very solid unit with very little limitations. The Phantom Rays are one of my favorite units. I think they offer a ton of value in being a tanky air presence, as well as provide some DPS that can help bring down larger units. You can absolutely win games with Phantom Rays as your carry, or playing a co-lead, but I think that has more to do with you winning everywhere else, or your opponent just not defending them properly. Also, I think it's best when it has nothing to do with being the carry. I like them a lot. I think they fit my style really well, but I can't put them higher than a C. This one's going to be controversial. I think Rhino is the most slept on unit in mech. It doesn't fill many positions. You're going to either rush with it or you're going to use it as a delayed tank. However, I think it plays its role better than any unit in the game. It doesn't add a lot of utility to the board, but it adds the most utility available to fill its role. What do I mean by this? You can make it tankier and brick a lot of units with armor enhancement. If they add chaff, you can get whirlwind. If they EMP, you can get photon. If they missile or use oil to slow you down, you can get power armor. You could just blow up, so even if they manage to take you out, you're going to take them out with you. If you need to go faster, you can do that as well. If your opponent clicks AA, don't worry about it because the Rhino is 30 meters himself, so the extra range from AA is not going to hurt your air units as long as the Rhino isn't eliminated. It has lifesteal. It's a 200 cost unit that plays with the confidence of a Titan. If you think the Rhino isn't good, you're not using them correctly. If you still don't believe me, please go watch Cheese's videos. He takes down 2,500 MMR players using Rhinos, or you can watch Roxas taking down anybody's tower on demand with them. I'm putting them in B tier. The Sabertooth is a strong unit. I think it's best early when capitalizing on boards that don't go well into it, or when you can use it as a mercenary unit from a high level job. It's powerful, it's inexpensive, has pretty good tech. I think it mostly just depends on the RNG of your opponent's starting units, or the RNG of the drop you get. Still going in C tier though. The Sandworm isn't used a lot. It's usually picked up and drops as a mercenary unit. This is really difficult to judge because I think it's actually very powerful and could fit pretty much any board in that role, but it's also just not going to be your carry or co-lead outside of a very couple specific compositions. The reason I want to give it a C is because even though it's not a carry or even part of your core composition, it can still have a large impact on the game just because of how tanky it is or annoying to deal with due to its burrowing. S for Scorpion. Sledges were S tier, but they recently got nerfed. I think they're still a very good unit, not many downsides to having sledges. The reason I'm putting it in C tier is because their chaff clear is decent but not good, their damage is good but not great. You can have EMP or damage, but not likely both. If you add damage, it's at the expense of your chaff clearing capabilities. Too many trade-offs for me to put it in B tier. It can be played in many different roles, and it's exceptional at flank pulls. It is a very, very strong unit. Going back to the Scorpion, just to be transparent, it's my favorite unit, so I'm probably biased, but I think the Scorpion's very good. It doesn't have a lot of downsides. It has acid for added utility, it has double shot for shield break and extra damage. The only reason I'm not putting it in B tier is because chaff is overtuned and it's just not going to help you out a whole lot in that department. It's not going to be good with aggro, it's reliant on chaff clear and your board, and it can't shoot up. For those reasons, I'm going to put it in the C tier. Even though I think it's on the cusp. I think you could make a case for it being in the B tier. Steel balls are a solid unit. They could be used as mercenaries, situational counters, co-leads, and they're very impactful when they have levels. They have a solid tech bar, but they have zero chaff clear. They require a lot of investment if you really want to utilize them, and they're very board reliant. They're still insanely impactful when they're on. They're another one of those units that when they're good, they're great. I think Stormcallers are best when you have one or two of them, and they're doing consistent damage to your opponent, but you haven't invested enough into them yet, so your opponent is in that weird spot where it's not quite enough for them to spend resources to stop it, but not doing so is annoying because they're taking quite a bit of damage. This is when Storms are at their best. Outside of that, I don't think they're very good. I do not like the fact that they were removed from starting packs and cost supply to unlock. They removed a wall, nerfed a wall, removed the Storms, and nerfed them in cost. It's just way too heavy-handed. They're going F. Tarantulas are in a very good spot. They're the second best or third best chaff clearing unit. That alone adds a tremendous amount of value. They're also tanky AF and can pack a punch. They could be played in aggro, bruiser, or standard. All around, they are a very solid unit with little to no downside. I want to like Typhoons, but I just don't. They're literally the only non-melee unit in the game that does not have range tech. It's too expensive for what they offer. They can be good sometimes though. I'll put them D. I just saw one of the best players in the world say he thinks Vulcans are the worst unit in the game, and I could not disagree more. The beauty of mech though, we're all going to have our own perspectives and see things through our own lens. I'm putting Vulcan in the A tier. I think it's the best chaff clear in the game. It has insane DPS, it has Ignite, and it has one of the best late game techs and best partner. There are very few compositions that not only scale better than Vulcan Marksman, but also very few that Vulcan Marksman or Vulcan Phoenix couldn't just flat out beat. It's also very good with Phoenix Melters and insert unit here because it basically goes with any unit that needs chaff clear. It's not perfect, of course, it can get tempoed if you aren't careful, and it's not good in aggro. But if you're a standard or defensive player, I think Vulcan is insane. It just does way too much. Way too well to not be A tier. I think Void Eyes are a good unit. Their role is just limited. They're not reliable carries. They don't scale exceptionally well. Their stats scale well, but their presence on the board just does not, if that makes sense. I think it's just that other units surpass them as round goes on, and that makes sense because Mechabellum's, 2 deployments per round, and they're only a 100 cost unit. However, I think they could be very good early. They are capable of having a huge impact on the game. I'm putting them in the D tier. I think they're on the cusp of C, but not quite. It doesn't mean they're bad, it just means that outside of the early game, I think their role is a little too unclear for me. Production War Factory is insane, that's all I have to say. Wasps are one of my favorite units. I recently heard another top player in the world say Wasps are bad, and it's crazy to me to think that two people could play this game and have two completely opposite perspectives. I can't even fathom why somebody would think Wasps are bad, but I genuinely think that is awesome. I really like how Mech can have completely opposite opinions. Everybody has, a different take because they have different experiences. Anyway, I think Wasps are nuts. They play a ton of different roles well. Their damage is super high. Their tech bar is amazing. They could be hyper carries. They could be carries with utility. They synergize with many compositions in various capacities exceptionally well. They're a premier anti-air option, and perhaps most importantly, they're the only unit in the game that can become a third primary chaff. Wasp with shields is just amazingly effective and isn't prone to things like fire. On the flip side, Outside of the chaff roll, they will require an investment. They're also very susceptible to spells. I absolutely love them though, one of the most versatile units in the game, but also one of the highest scaling units. I almost put them in the A tier. I was very close, but I think I'm going to put them in the B tier. And what's funny is that you could actually chaff clear with wasps. Lastly, we have the Wraith. It is an absolutely exceptional unit. It has good damage when you get levels or 8 gun. It has great chaff clear. It's either the second or third best chaff clear unit in the game. It has the utility of degen. It uses items really well. There are just pretty much no bad things to say about the Wraith. It's going A tier. Just to be clear, none of the units are bad. It's just some of them fit better into roles than others, or perhaps have less downsides relative to their counterparts. Let me know what I got wrong in the comments. Maybe you'll change my mind for next time. I'm Whooped. Thanks for watching.
This is Mechabellum, and it's going down. Whooped got it popping round.